with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. David Gornoski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay safe. From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be with you once again, live on FM, AM, video stream, podcast, and wherever else. Happy to have this time together to explore the news like nobody else does. And that's because we're guided by the personhood revolution of Jesus. That means we treat each other as neighbors, not as collective cogs in some kind of ideological tribal warfare. That's what the media from the corporate press, that's what their privileged mouths do. They are privileged, they're decadent, and they know not what they do. They're lost in their own arrogance, lost in their own darkness, and they continue to sow discord, distrust. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to build unity based on mutual respect for neighbors, not trying to censor everything. You know, when I saw I was looking at, the social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, seeing what they're saying is news today. And it's amazing because it just reads again like a DNC PR talking point memorandum, or a memo. They don't even try. If you're trying to be a good propagandist to try to, manipulate people in an effective and subtle way, you would try to show that things, there's this that looks bad for this group, or there's this that, try to be balanced and try to make it look. They don't even try. I mean, everything they select on Twitter as to be, a trending topic is something that is an attack against critics of the regime. DC has a love affair with regime change, and the media that always covers for their failure after failure, their fleecing of the public, their exploitation of your labor, they always make regime change look great when it's the kind of regime change they want. And so when you see this, this new administration coming in, you see the band is back together. I saw the press conference that Biden's administration was having, and the press were asking amazing questions. They were saying, so is the president going to change the interior decoration that Trump had in the Air Force One? And the press lady says, that's a good question. Great question. It is a good question, unless you're a child that's been killed and maimed by wars that Obama, Biden made happen. And you want answers. You want justice. You want accountability. You don't want a reckless empire. But the media that's arrayed in that little White House press conference, White House press briefing room, they are for empire. They're for privilege and decadence and disregard for the lives of people who are marginalized. They are folks that don't care about the consequences of their reckless actions. And so you look at what they push They push glorious propaganda. Fauci announces that U.S. will rejoin the World Health Organization. And if they wanted to if they wanted to do their job, they'd say, this comes after a long record of the WHO getting it wrong over and over and over again, telling the world that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission of this virus in China back in January. They failed. They caused immense amount of suffering. They were attacking travel bans. That, again, cost millions of people's lives potentially by their own standards of how many people have been harmed by this. They don't even understand the immune system. The WHO is still pushing garbage seed oils, toxic sludge, big corporate seed oils. And lemmings that read BuzzFeed gobble up those seed oils and say, well, I'm healthy because they called them plant-based oils. You just say the word plant-based, and it's like a wabong. The robot mind just kicks in. Hello, here I am. They're ready to go. You just say the word plant-based regime change, and they'll go for it. You tell the left, we're going to have plant-based regime change in Syria. They say, okay, that's wonderful. Wow. We need to have regime change in Syria because we got to make sure that men who want to identify as women can play in all the sports in Syria and Damascus. So we're going to do it by force. We're going to create bloody chaos, and it's going to be plant-based regime change. And they're going to say, oh, that's wonderful. Here's 10 reasons why we can do a great job making Syria and Damascus the next home of plant-based harmony. This is the stupidity. They don't ever, by the way, they never measure the carbon footprint of all the bombs that New York Times promotes. Have you noticed that? They never tell you the carbon footprint of all the bombs and all the planes and all the jets that the New York Times has sold you on scattering around the country, around the globe, around the world. They don't tell you that carbon footprint, do they? All they do is bring out little, PR stunts like hiding behind a teenage kid like Greta and saying, hey, look at Greta. She's going to say something really, really edgy against the president that we all aligned ourselves against. Wow. Oh my goodness. Truth to power. Wow. And then if you ask those guys, hey, instead of using a teenager to promote giant green industry scams, fake green industry, can you tell me how low temperature nuclear reactions work? BuzzFeed couldn't tell you. Had to save their life. New York Times doesn't know how to spell these things. They don't know who Martin Fleischmann is. They don't know anything about this stuff. If you told them to explain 24/7 solar panels and how that's a technology that needs to be investigated, they would say, I don't see it on TV. It's not real. I don't see it from Popular Science and Bill Nye the Science Guy. Therefore, it doesn't exist. Wow. This is the Luddite party of the TV party. This is what these folks are all about. Luddite. They can't even talk to you about science. They know nothing about science. They can't tell you what seed oils do to your DNA. They can't tell you what they do to your mitochondria. They know nothing. Don't ever, ever, ever let these people lecture you about science. They know absolutely nothing about science. What they do know is they want to fit in and they want to feel special. They're miserable people. These are miserable people. They spend their whole life miserable. The whole time they had their thug, Joe Biden, elected, a man who has raped countries all over the world for profit, pillaging countries like Ukraine, poor countries that can't fight back. He pillages countries the way he talks to people who disagree with him. Go look at what he says to the union worker about taking away AR-15s. He says, I'll take you back. You want to go outside? That's the way he treats countries. You see how he talks to citizens. You see how Joe Biden talks to citizens who he feels doesn't have as much power as him. He calls them names. He calls the auto work. I'm talking about the union worker. Go look it up. You know it. It was a little thing that was going around. And he says, you want to go outside, take this outside. He calls them a horse's tail, blank. He used the cuss word. He says, you're full of blank to a citizen because the guy calls him out for being in alignment with Beto O'Rourke or whatever about taking guns. So the guy can't handle criticism from someone that he thinks is lower than him. And that's the same way he treats countries that he thinks he can get away with bullying and pillaging. That's the kind of bigot that the New York Times and BuzzFeed and AP and all these places, YouTube and Facebook and every frickin' state media outlet imaginable, that's who they worship. But you see what they do? They're so miserable. They're so fueled by hate that even in his day of inauguration, they spent all their time thinking about Donald Trump. Their whole reality is based on unifying around hatred. They feed off of hatred. They're vampires. They feed off of psychic hatred, psychological hatred. You had little Anderson Cooper, who's never found a country with people of color that he's not okay with having regime change, chaos, and bloody coups in. If the CIA and everybody tells him that's what they need to do, he's chuckling because Trump's flying off to the song, I Did It My Way. It's so funny. He doesn't care that there are people locked up for decades because of the guy that he's just pushed into the White House, Joe Biden. He doesn't care. He's chuckling. This is what these people do, these folks do. They are always chuckling to themselves because they're so based in hatred. They're so based in hatred that these folks can't understand that there's so much suffering that doesn't need to be happening, but is happening precisely because of their pushing for wicked state policies. Policies based on hate, not love. Back in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice. We'll take a quick break and return in just a moment. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Hello, this is David Gornoski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida. Or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. A Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm David Gornoski, your host. So we just dealt with their, bigotry on display. They don't care about the people of color that will be bombed and attacked by the policies of corporatists like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They don't care. They don't care about the black-owned businesses that will be attacked, like always, by rich, hateful people like Antifa, they don't care. What they care about is power. And the reason they have power is because they are imitating the Christian aesthetic and its concern for victims. And in a world in which the Christian aesthetic of taking care of the least of these is still that which haunts us the most and pricks our conscience the most, even if we reject the metaphysics of Christian religion, as society is wont to do, it is still the driving animus behind the stories that capture hearts and minds. And the left has had that monopoly on Goosebumps, on production of Goosebumps for a long time. But I want to point your attention to, just an example of the mundane, banal bigotry of these outlets, of these publishers like YouTube. YouTube took it upon themselves to notify me that they have deleted a video. Now, we've known for some time YouTube is a minor afterthought for my media platform. We have thousands and thousands of listeners on radio in major markets. We have thousands and thousands around the world on our podcast stream and our website. And YouTube has always been an afterthought. People say, why don't you put more attention into YouTube? Why don't you do little videos where you walk around in the garage or by the, walk around in your neighborhood and say, hey guys, I'm just thinking about something today about Rene Girard. No, I'm not going to do that YouTube crap. That's not my medium. It is an afterthought at best. And I know the problem is I've met a lot of great friends, and followers on YouTube and listeners and viewers. That's wonderful. But they are not my focus, the YouTube platform, precisely because of this. I'll give you an example. They cannot censor my voice. They cannot deal with my radio platforms. Here's one. How can Satan cast out Satan? That was an episode that I did on January 7th. You might have listened to it. The day after the Capitol riot. And they've taken that video down, they told me, because the content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches change the outcome of the U.S. 2020 presidential election is not allowed on YouTube. If you listen to the episode, which is still on my website, go to neighborschoice.com and search for how can Satan cast out Satan. YouTube tried to cast out Satan casting out Satan. See what I mean? They can't handle the truth. If you listen to that episode or watch it on platforms that are not fascist like YouTube, you will see that it is a hour-long defense of dignifying the human person and protecting people from violence. And I condemned all political violence. And that's why they deleted it. Now, my theory is I went and listened to the show again just to see what are these fascists up to today. And what did the only thing I can give them that they might use is their little robots or drones or purple-haired fascists who run their little thing that they might have. I played Donald Trump's clip that they deleted off of the face of the internet where he condemns the violence and tells his followers to go home. But he also says, we won this, we won this by a lot. Right. And so that's probably I'm assuming that their little algorithm picked up on the audio clip and said, you must delete any mention of this president saying this statement. And so that's what I'm assuming, because otherwise they are, dropping the mask faster than we can possibly imagine, because the entire episode, I condemned Trump's approach and I condemned the establishment's approach and I condemned all crowd violence. I condemned all of the collectivist coercion. I condemned all the regime change wars of Obama. And I think that's probably what they don't like the most. Perhaps I'm being too charitable. Perhaps it wasn't me playing Trump's statement when he was president, condemning the violence. Perhaps it's me condemning Mark Zuckerberg and the others for giving a platform to Obama to incite chaotic violence and insurrection in countries all around the world. Countries like Egypt, countries like Tunisia, countries like Syria, Libya, Ukraine, where innocent lives were harmed and brutalized men, women, children, and so forth, brutalized because Obama used Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and other platforms and other media outlets that are state-owned and state-submitted in their every mouth to sow chaos and political violence. And I was condemning Mark Zuckerberg for being a hypocrite of the highest caliber, of using his platform to give a voice to reckless bigotry like President Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden exhibited, and using their platforms to call for chaos and violence in the streets in order to topple administrations around the world that many of them were installed by their DC allies. So I think that's what they want to censor. So they took that video down, but their audience is a small fraction of our voice. And now I will amplify that message again, as I've just done, which is that YouTube and Facebook and Twitter represent yesterday's news. They represent the last dying grasp of the TV era's tentacles trying to get a hold of the digital era and bring it to heel. But it will fail. This is just a transitionary stage in our emerging moment. This is a transitionary stage in which a bigot like Mark Zuckerberg creates a platform to exploit in a chauvinistic way, in a misogynistic way, girls on his campus that he wanted to get, but he couldn't get. And this is an example where this kind of a loser sells his soul out every step of the way based on envy, based on resentment, based on not measuring up to people that he wanted to be like. And he creates an entire platform, and so did these other little folks like Jack Dorsey. And they spend their whole life, please love me, please give me attention, please and it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Their money they can't take with them. When they go, when they're done with this life, they will have to live with the consequences of being an entirely sellout of a human being. That they sold out their mouth, their time, their skill set to people like Barack Obama and Trump, but they didn't care about Trump. They didn't push his stuff. They pushed people like Obama and they pushed people like Biden and Kamala Harris to wreak havoc on marginalized communities around the world. And they can't stand voices like mine because I know their playbook. I know their whole little playbook about trying to hide behind victims to get the moral high ground. And I cut that stupid little moral high ground to pieces. And they can't handle the message that I represent, because I represent something far beyond and far more interesting than the goop that has come from conservative Inc. for so long, because they don't know the number. They don't have their number. I've got their number. I know what their whole little style is. It's all about presenting victimism as the mask that allows them to take authoritarian, fascistic power from people and against people. But I know their little number because I approach things from an anthropological perspective, which gives me a broader toolkit to use to see what they're doing. And it's not just me. There's many, many other people like me, but they're not used to this in political commentary. They're used to this being tucked away in academia or something else like that. They're not used to someone taking something like anthropology and ethics and then bringing it to the masses together and calling their garbage out. They're not used to that. They can't handle it. So they're going to desperately press the delete button, and I couldn't care less because they're the TV party. They're the TV era of ABC and NBC and CBS trying to grab a hold of the digital renaissance of information and trying to clamp it down and stop voices like me promoting nonviolence and peace. But they will fail because they're using technology and ideas from the 20th century at best. And we're in the 21st century. And their ideas will fail. They will backfire. And as I told you, they will be forgotten in history as a sad last gasp of the TV era's attempt to fascistically control information and to promote war and authoritarian economic control. Bye-bye, your guys. Your time's up. We're moving forward. Back in a moment.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on. The madness of 2020.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going on.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHBO.
President Joe Biden at the White House laying out his COVID-19 vaccination plan, saying there is no time to waste with 407,000 Americans dead in just 1 year.
We're in a national emergency. It's time we treat it like one, together with a national plan as the United States of America.
Biden signing executive actions to fund testing, expand vaccination megasites in states and also in communities of color which suffered disproportionately from the virus.
Our plan also protects those most at risk and works for everyone of all races and in urban and rural communities alike.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is staying on in his role from the previous administration, also spoke at the daily press briefing following the signing, saying vaccinations will need to ramp up in order to protect Americans as this virus mutates.
So even though the virus on a one-to-one basis isn't more serious, the phenomenon of a more transmissible virus is something that you take seriously.
Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski, your host, and we're now joined by a friend of the program, someone who considers himself on the left, but he's the real left, the left that actually cares about principles and peace. We have with us retired major from the U.S. Army, Danny Sjursen. How you doing, Danny?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you on because, you know, I didn't watch the inauguration too much. I saw a few clips here and there, but I wanted to get your overall assessment, if you watched it, your take on the signals of the Biden administration based on staffing, based on language used, about what you think is going to happen with foreign policy now that we're ready to go.
Well, you know, I mean, it was a perfectly fine ceremony by, you know, the basic merits of politeness. And I think that what you see there is a lot of theater and not a whole lot of in-depth discussion. I mean, how much discussion of policy were we talking about? You would never believe by watching that ceremony that there was really a 20-year, you know, neo-imperial bipartisan war project ongoing. That just isn't on the agenda. I mean, we get Lady Gaga, we get poetry that excites everybody, and let's just assume that that's all great. I mean, that, like, leaving that aside, I don't think that that's the issue per se, but given who Joe Biden is, and I think he essentially is who he says he is and who he's always been, I just think that the theater of inauguration and the triumphalism of, you know, liberals in the establishment everywhere who, you know, the position was if you even raise questions about this incoming administration, essentially for months before the inauguration, but certainly not on the day, because if you do it then, if you do it on the day of, then that's just impolite, right? That's just not done. And so, I mean, this was theater. It always is. It's not any worse per se from the Biden squad, but I think that just overall, there wasn't a whole lot of substance, and I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of substance except in maybe a few areas, but it's going to be at the margins.
Also wanted to get your take. What did you think of the display of the National Guard? What was it, 30,000 troops there, and they didn't have guns or something? It was very bizarre. What's your take on that as a veteran?
Well, you know, I mean, the bottom line is that it is, of course, troubling anytime there's a situation in the United States of America where there's, you know, going to be that kind of a lockdown. And, you know, it all there's plenty of talk on, the polite left that says, don't question any of this because what happened at the Capitol is awful. And again, let's accept that to be exactly true. I still think that there are troubling signals about a nation that is, in fact, so divided that has to happen. And the ease with which the purported left, right, the civil liberties champions on the left, they just accept it if it's their team that's doing the surveillance, that's doing the mass deployments of domestic National Guard. I mean, they'll scream to high heavens if that was being done by the other side, and I just don't see any consistency. And what gets me about it is that time and again we've seen that the tools of repression, right, the tools of government repression, they don't really care if it's a red team, blue team issue in the long term, in the long game. But every time you see the establishments of both parties fall for that. And then, of course, the partisans of that establishment, on Main Street, but especially in, the wealthier suburbs of, bigger cities. And so I think that what was particularly troubling about it is the ease with which the people accept the mechanisms of their own future and current repression. And of course, that always involves empire coming home.
And why is it that there seems to be, because you're on the left, but why is it that it seems like there's such a institutional support for violence and aggressive rhetoric from ostensibly left-wing causes, from almost all media in DC? I mean, you saw what they did where they were getting close to the White House and it was getting dangerous and they had to put the president in the nuclear bunker. And the media just laughed at that. They're like, this is great. Well, those are our shock troops. This is really nice, And they were saying this is a sacred cause. They're doing it for George Floyd. Therefore it's okay. It's sacred. Yeah, maybe a little rough here or there, but that's okay. It's just infiltrated by some bad guys from the right or something. But when it's this constant kind of making excuses for political violence on left-wing brand issues, but not right-wing, why do you think that is? What is it about that?
I do think that there are differences, based on motive, and, I'll out myself there a bit. But I'll say this, one of the misunderstandings, and some of it is a self-styling, right? A delusional, or at the very least, a dishonest self-styling, and a lot of people buy into it. On both sides, actually, to a certain extent, that the left is supposed to somehow be like the peaceniks and, almost pacifists, right? I mean, they're almost too weak, would be what their critics would say. And I think that's just largely a misunderstanding of history, both in the United States and elsewhere. Take war policy. I mean, war policy hasn't been a Republican agenda or a conservative agenda per se. It's been a bipartisan agenda. It's been a big government agenda. It's, all of this. I do not think that most Americans who call themselves red team, call themselves blue team, who virtue signal that on Facebook, I do not think that most of them are even at this point capable, apparently, of self-awareness, of perspective, proportion, or contrast. And so the intellectual dishonesty that flows from the intellectual inconsistency it's through the roof. And only in such a society, right, that misunderstands what the, liberal left or the, center left, whatever you want to call it, the establishment left, right? Whatever kind of society accepts unquestioned, right, uncritically, when someone like Rachel Maddow goes from writing books that are pretty critical of things and, make sense on foreign policy and intelligence operations, and then when someone she really doesn't like becomes president, the FBI and the CIA and anybody who ever works for them, no matter what their past record, is not only a repeated guest, but a glorified and adulated guest. And so I think what that shows is it's not necessarily violence per se that some of these people are against, especially if it's overseas violence, but even in our own streets, it's not necessarily violence people are against. It's what people are against on the establishment left, and this goes on both sides as well, is when they're the victims of it, or people that they like or policies that they purport to like are the victim of it. And that's the kind of inconsistency that creates a forever war overseas, and then all the ramifications of militarism at home. And of course, a clampdown of the civil liberties that comes with it, because things are lost in wars, whether those wars are in our own streets or in streets like Baghdad.
Well, how can a democracy survive if there's that level of unself-awareness or whatever in the population, as you suggest there is. Because I kind of agree with you on that. But how can a democracy actually like function if there's that level of people who are literally not self-aware to understand that, oh, just because the giant corporation that owns NBC is telling me this is a good word doesn't mean it's okay. There just seems to be a very difficult barrier to make democracy function when there's that level of people who don't seem to be like awake or even, you know, rationally processing the events they're seeing.
Well, certainly in my darker moments, I wonder to myself if, you know, did Plato have it right? Is a philosopher king the way to go? And I'm mostly being flip. I don't actually generally want that. You know, it's sort of one of those Churchillisms or something that like democracy is the worst system except for all the other ones. But no, this raises serious questions. And these are, by the way, questions that our founders dealt with rather extensively in things like the Federalist Papers and then even some of the anti-Federalist stuff written under Brutus, which is, you know, to what extent is popular will trustworthy? And some of these were rather elitist and anti-democratic instincts. And I don't look at all of them fondly, but, you know, there's often enough truth in things like that that we have to engage with it. And so when you silo the knowledge of the people into basically two brands of media, which becomes two brands of knowledge, when you have folks that are running in the lizard brain, but think they're intellectuals, you know, they read the New Yorker, so that means they're intellectuals, but they're actually operating with the basest instincts of the lizard brain, my stuff versus your stuff, my people versus your people, tribal. And then what they do is they kind of shake it up, you know, they kind of like shake it up in a martini shaker. And what they spill out is, no, I'm urbane, right? I've got this. Some of them will even say, oh, look, I'm woke. And it's just they're not dealing with the systemic issues because that's uncomfortable and people don't like intellectual discomfort. Unfortunately, intellectual discomfort happens to be basically the only way to have any sort of sophisticated and nuanced knowledge with which to make decisions. But we're just not there.
Yeah, it just seems like the human species is not capable of handling the level, or at least maybe it's a temporary thing, hopefully. But you just look at the level of programming that goes on with the media and Facebook and Twitter and everything, the whole TV apparatus. And you think to yourself, I mean, man, can people be that gullible and can this sustain in any way that will not devolve into chaos? Because, you know, I was thinking about when the left wanted Trump to do regime change in Syria, you know, and the right doesn't know how to play this kind of game. They don't know how to do this thing. But, you know, if the right had any sense, they would get on there and say the names, and they would personalize the people who have been killed in Syria because of Obama Biden policy for regime change there. You know, the funding of Al Qaeda, the funding of these rebel groups, these terrorist groups, and say names, personalize it, find people, families, put their names out, say their names left if you want to go and create chaos for them. Yes, Assad is a bad guy, but you knew what Cindy Sheehan told you about Iraq. And so why do you forget it now? You know, they don't know how, the right doesn't know how to provide an argument, period. I don't know why. That's not my team. But I'm just talking to you as someone on the left. How do we get through that insane, like you said, lizard brain, shut down brain that just can't fathom that, hey, you know, the TV tells me I should think about the victim of state violence like George Floyd, but I should probably also think that if they get their way and have regime change war in Syria, there's probably going to be thousands of people like George Floyd that have awful deaths, and they're wonderful people. How could I possibly go along with NBC telling me to go for this war? How do we even get people to think this way? It's mind numbing that they can't figure this out.
Well, here's an interesting bit of like sort of inside baseball. You know, in some of the anti-war organizations that I'm a part of, there's even a divide there. I'm talking the more left-leaning ones, right? So not so much Bring Our Troops Home, but some of the others, right, where they're generally left-leaning. And what I've been noticing is that if you follow the social media, for example, and some of the battles that go on, and it gets pretty personal pretty quick, of course, because that's just the way it is, and it's always been thus. But, you know, there's a group that is saying, you know, it's it's racist to criticize Biden somehow, even though Biden has like problematic racial policies because, you know, of how bad Trump is, or that it's like you don't like society and democracy because of what happened at the Capitol. There's a lot of this on one end, and then the other end's like, no, hold on, we like Biden is who Biden is, and like we have to keep the fire up from day one. And they each like kind of post different things. And what's been interesting is I have been told by people I trust several times that they have been these people on the left, pretty far left oftentimes, they have been like attacked more viciously internally from like other liberals for, you know, continuing to say, wait a second, we probably shouldn't get too excited about Biden. I saw it yesterday on social media in those circles. If anyone dared to say, listen, I'm not totally enthusiastic about this inauguration and what it portends, you know, this is not the choice I wanted to have and all this. And most of these statements, by the way, are always caveated with, listen, I don't want Trump. So in other words, even when they say that, that's not good enough. Like, you're not allowed to criticize Biden. And so here's what worries me about the Biden administration, for example. You mentioned Cindy Sheehan, Iraq, and you mentioned Syria. And, you know, how do we get people to actually, you know, how do we get people to believe that, okay, all lives matter, which is one slogan, or that, let's even say, black and brown lives matter, right? How do we get them to equate that with consistency? So meaning here in the States, but also overseas. And so what do you have in the Biden administration? Okay, mostly what you have national security-wise coming in are the arsonists and the architects, or the architects come arsonists, right, of the following places: Yemen, Syria, and Libya, for starters, okay? These are the societies they shattered, okay? And then what you have is you even have a little bit of inflection of the old school, you know, Republican neocon brand that's coming through marriage with Victoria Nuland, and coming through the fact that the Biden administration is looking, especially on national security, like the front row of the McCain funeral, right? It's a big hug party between both establishments. And so you've got even people talked about who were seriously advising Biden, who were like Burns and Nuland, who had worked with like Cheney and some of the George W. Bush guys. So what does that mean? There's at least a tacit alliance with some of the architects of what? Afghanistan and Iraq. Mm-hmm. So it means it's like this perfect storm, and no one wants to talk about it. Everybody's cool with it, and you know, it's not said. It's not said. That's how we do the repression now. It's not said. And I just think that we are going to rue the day, and I'm just wondering what it's going to take for people to say systemic flaws. The system is the problem. And unfortunately, you would have thought enough things would have happened in the last 20 years to make that the case, but it doesn't appear to be the case.
We're speaking with Danny Sjursen, who's an author, speaker, podcaster. You can visit his website, skepticalvet.com, or check out his podcast, fortressonahill.com. We'll take a quick break and return in just a moment with more from Major Sjursen. David Gornoski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Hello, this is David Gornoski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski, here with my friend Danny Sjursen, who's a podcaster. I want everyone to check out his content because he's got unique perspective on foreign policy and issues revolving our, civic activities around the world. What are we getting ourselves into around the world? You want to get it from a perspective like Danny Sjursen provides as a veteran. Go to his podcast, fortressonahill.com. That's fortressonahill.com. So, Danny, I wanted to go back. I wonder, do you think that if Donald Trump had done the bidding of the neocon internationalist fusion establishment of the Dem and the Republicans, if he had done their bidding and said, okay, yes, sir, I'm going to do regime change fully and take out Assad, do you think he would have been reelected? So basically, if he had created insurrection in Damascus, that he would have been reelected with a Netflix deal maybe coming soon?
Well, it's interesting you would say that, because if he had kind of towed a certain line, so and this isn't even like a compliment to Donald Trump in any way. It's just an objective sort of trying to be disinterested statement. If he had towed the line a bit more in terms of what they call internationalism, he escalated plenty of bombing situations and all this, but he wasn't really speaking the language, and wasn't necessarily starting some of the new kind of regime change via proxy, which is still wildly bloody for the locals. He didn't do a whole lot of that, and he didn't speak the language and didn't use the buzzwords necessarily that they wanted to hear. And so I do think that was at least a part, and probably somewhat significant part, of what drove sort of the Never Trumper and establishment Lincoln Republican revolt. I haven't looked carefully enough at some of the exit polling and exit voting to see exactly what the statistical effect would have been, but I know there'll be scholarly studies coming out, just like there were about the counties where soldiers had high casualty rates in the war on terror and how that influenced the Trump administration or the Trump getting elected in 2016. So I guess what I'm saying is my sense is that with even just some changes in the language around the margins that made him seem a little bit more palatable to the, establishment hawkish and, traditionally hawkish, Republican Party, he might not have seen as much of a backlash there. That's for sure.
Yeah. I just wonder, if it's one of those things where if he's not going to play ball, because I know that, Bush did his regime change, Obama took the mantle and kept it going, and Trump didn't do enough to stop it. But if he had just done a little bit more, if he had said, it is time for regime change to save the children of Syria, Assad will now be gone. You had those state media outlets like, the View just excoriating him because of him not backing up the Kurds. I mean, I'm just wondering, in an alternate universe, would they have said, oh, this is actually great. He's at, because they signaled that their little programming machine just turned on a dime when he threw those strikes out at Assad at the beginning. Remember Brian Williams? Oh my goodness, this is a glorious sight. Oh, I love it. And they said, oh, he just became president. Oh, wow, this is exciting. So if you just kept it going and started mouthing their rhetoric, I wonder if they wouldn't have turned on their media machines so unified against him, calling everybody that even looks at him as a Nazi. And I wonder if they would have toned that down a little bit and say, let's give him the McCain or Romney treatment. Not, we'll be biased, but not so all out,
I mean, I think we don't talk enough, right? It was forgotten too quickly, and we don't speak enough about how absolutely bizarre it is, right? Or how bizarre it should be to most people, that bombing a country we aren't at war with, right, without any real long-term strategy or even second and third order sort of like operational policies in the wings, in a country where, in a region, in fact, where we know that U.S. military intervention is empirically and demonstrably counterproductive. That's what made, it was like the one thing. That's what made people say, people who are like vaguely on the establishment left say, yep, he became president tonight. Mm-hmm. Is there not something obscene about that? Right. I mean, even if you take Trump out of the equation and that anyone they don't like or any president, I mean, we don't talk enough about that. I mean, it makes you into a conspiratorial thinker. It makes you think that there really are like puppet masters that have like the initials MIC, military industrial complex, written on their foreheads, pulling the strings of these marionettes, because it's wild. I mean, they've never disliked a president more, you know, in the modern era. These sorts of media figures are talking about who said, oh, he just became president. And yet, when he bombs somebody, someone that they like bombing, someone they wanted bombed, because otherwise it would have been the day he became, you know, that would have been when he became Hitler or whatever. It's just, it's wild. It is wild. You know what it is, though? It's a symptom, right? This is a time of pandemic, right? It's a symptom of a sick society. Yeah. A society drunk on war, a society that is high on militarism, and also has a secondary diagnosis of delusion about the fact that they are. And at least most people, some of the more savvy and cynical types will admit what they are, but most people don't. They don't see it about themselves, or they just deny it.
In a society that has lost a principle that human life is sacred, no matter where they're at, because I find it so racist and disgusting that Mark Zuckerberg and YouTube and these platforms, they silenced Trump because of his Capitol riot, but they never silenced Obama when he incited riot and violence and mayhem, and like you said, Yemen and Libya and Egypt, the Arab Spring. They didn't silence that, and it just tells you right there that the lives lost and those chaos moments that they sowed, they didn't matter as much. They simply did not matter as much because they didn't have any political power. And so Mark Zuckerberg said, I don't care. Obama can say whatever he wants. He can go up there and say, we need to go into Libya. And then all the kids and the families that are harmed there, they don't have anybody having their back. You know, Facebook and Twitter did nothing. Hey, we need to censor the president here. You're out of control here. We shouldn't be going to war like that. You're going to hurt people of color in Libya. No, you didn't hear any of that. And that tells you how racist and chauvinistic as these media outlets are, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, certainly one of the blind spots always for most Americans, but particularly on the liberal establishment side, is an inability to connect what's foreign with what's domestic, a penchant, an obsession almost, with carving out discrete spheres as though there's no overlap in the Venn diagram, when in reality it's not. It looks more like a single circle than a Venn diagram. Okay, and I think that's an important point that's missed oftentimes.
Yeah, it's very good. I always enjoy talking to you because, you know, I think it's great to have voices like you on the left, and I hope that your voice becomes more and more the mainstream perspective so that we can build a coalition across party lines and really have a more sane and civil society. So thanks for your time, Danny Sjursen.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And visit his website, fortressonahill.com, or check out his articles at skepticalvet.com. I'm David Gornoski. We'll be back in just a moment for hour 2 of our broadcast, but for now, Godspeed.
for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. All hands on deck. President Joe Biden urging Americans to mask up and act together to contain the pandemic.
If we do this as Americans, the experts say by wearing a mask from now until April, we'd save more than 50,000 lives.
It's been 1 year to the day since the first U.S. case of COVID was reported. Deaths now surpass 407,000. The president signing executive orders to tackle the health and economic disasters unfolding.
He says his COVID plan rivals anything they've done after some of the nation's worst natural disasters.
This is a model we used to respond to Hurricane Sandy, which I was deeply involved with.
President Biden ordering all foreign travelers to get COVID tested before flying to the U.S. Other orders include speeding vaccine production, freeing disaster relief money, and working better with local governments to get vaccines out faster. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
Senate confirmation hearings continuing today. Congressional leaders also trying to work on a timeline to hold the impeachment trial against former President Trump related to the U.S. Capitol attacks. Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said members of Congress are attending sessions to deal with the emotional trauma from that day, and not just the physical damage.
That is damage. That is damage that must be addressed.
One Pennsylvania woman now under home confinement accused of stealing a computer during the day of the siege.
Riley Williams has been vilified by the FBI, her attorney said, arguing the allegations against her have been overstated and based on an abusive boyfriend's account. Williams was released into the custody of her mother as the FBI continues to investigate a claim she spoke to friends about stealing a laptop from House Speaker Pelosi's office and selling it to the Russians. A more recent arrest is Michael Foy of Michigan. He was accused of assaulting a law enforcement officer at the Capitol with a hockey stick.
ABC's Aaron Katursky. You're listening to ABC News.
Cindy and her husband felt stuck paying annual fees on their timeshare. But what could they do?
We tried to sell it, but no results. No results at all.
Then they called Newton Group, and that's when things really started to happen.
We got a call within days. We never felt like they forgot us because we would get updates along the way.
Before long, they were free and clear.
We signed up with Newton Group in August, and it was a done deal by January.
And how's Cindy now?
We're very happy with Newton Group. It was a very, very positive experience for us, and we highly recommend them. And we are looking forward to not having to pay the $1,500 a year.
Do what Cindy did. Call Newton Group for your free consultation and free consumer's guide to timeshare exit. Call 877-TOP-EXIT. That's 877-TOP-EXIT. Newton Group has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, so call them at 877-TOP-EXIT or visit newtonexit.com today.
The U.S. has condemned 2 deadly bombings in Iraq. The suicide blasts ripping through a busy market in Baghdad, killing at least 32 people. For the second day in a row, Britain's recorded another record increase in COVID-related deaths. Details from ABC's Tom Rivers in London.
Over 1,800 died here over the past 24 hours. Cabinet member Gavin Williamson on the current lockdown.
I think everyone right across the country, not just in government, wants to see Britain exiting from lockdown at the earliest possible stage, but we've had to take these measures in order to alleviate pressure on the NHS.
That's the National Health Service. Britain has the highest virus-related death toll in Europe and 5th highest in the world. Tom Rivers, ABC News, London.
One lucky ticket matches all the numbers to the huge Powerball jackpot. Somebody bought it in Allegheny County, Maryland. More from ABC's Alex Stone.
Who it is, nobody knows.
It's time to play America's favorite jackpot game.
But the hunt is on right now in Maryland and in this area for the winner of the $731 million. After rolling over for months, the jackpot ballooned, but the money grab is not over yet. Friday's Mega Millions drawing is now up to nearly $1 billion, $970 million, the second highest in Mega Millions history. Alex Stone, ABC News, Washington.
This is ABC News.
Ready to create your own income with your own home-based business where there's no such thing as getting laid off? If a billionaire entrepreneur spent 5 years and $20 million searching for the next big trend, wouldn't you want to know what he found? If you're serious about making money from home without having to leave home, then write this down. www.goherenext.com. You decide your income. Get the facts now. GoHereNext.com.
I'm Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be with you once again for another edition of our broadcast. It's Thursday, which means it's time for our Thursday tradition of having the first half of the program dedicated to the world of hard science, physical science, chemistry, the universe, galaxies, planets, electricity, how it works, how to create a better world using our own skin in the game. And then the second half, we follow up with a look at the dismal science. We look at economics with friends from the Mises Institute who are dedicated to nonviolence and personal property, personal private contract. And so joining me now for our Science and You segment of the show that you've come to know and enjoy is our Chief Science Advisor for A Neighbor's Choice, our physicist friend, Dr. Yu. How you doing, Dr. Yu?
Thank you, David. So I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
Very good. Great to have you on as always. And let's hit the ground running. I saw a few stories that we could cover together. We have one that says in bigthink.com, scientists confirm quantum response to magnetism in cells. University of Tokyo scientists observed predicted quantum biochemical effects on cells. So it says that scientists suspect quantum effects are behind animals' ability to perform geomagnetic navigation. Geomagnetic navigation is believed to be light-based. Researchers watch as magnet-induced quantum changes affect cells' luminescence. We know at this point that there are species that can navigate using Earth's magnetic field. Birds use this ability in their long-distance migrations, and the list of such species keeps getting longer. Scientists, for the first time, observed changes in magnetism prompting a biomechanical reaction in cells. And if that's not cool enough, the cells involved in the research were human cells, lending support to theories that we ourselves have what it takes to get around using the planet's magnetic field. Well, Dr. Yu, you talk about magnetism all the time, so I wanted to give this to you because we've talked about this before, that there's a magnetic component to human cells before any of this study came out.
Yes, I have not read the article you're reading, but I'm not surprised at all. If you think about it, all the so-called mysterious quantum effect, it's actually just magnetic effect, okay? So that's why I'm totally, and then the second fact is all the human tissues, include cells, or even down to size of molecules or atoms or nucleus, they're all made by magnetic particles. So of course, when you have a magnetic field interact with a cell, you will see quantum effect because that kind of interaction electromagnetic interaction, create a quantum effect. That's exactly what a magnetic effect. So based on this one, so say all the biological, microbeings, all the lives, include the sea life, human life, or in the single cell lives, they're all made by magnetic particles. Of course, it has a magnetic field, and that field will interact with the global Earth's magnetic field. So that's where human beings find the direction. When you are healthy and have a good night's sleep, you wake up, you are very clear, you very much know the direction and where you're located, you very much know that one, because your magnetic field, your personal field, strong field, can sense the Earth's magnetic field, have very stable pattern. But if you are sick, what happens? You're distorted, your magnetic field is distorted, you suddenly lost the direction. That's a magnetic effect.
Yeah, look at this.
I hope.
Yeah, look at this. The article goes on and says, since magnetism can affect the spin of electrons, every 4 seconds the scientists swept a magnet over the cells. They observed that their fluorescence dimmed by about 3.5% each time they did this, as shown in the image at the beginning of this article. Their interpretation is that the presence of the magnet caused the electrons in the radical pairs to align, slowing down chemical reactions in the cell so that there were fewer molecules available for producing fluorescence. What do you think of that?
Yes, that's exactly what a magnetic field interact with the cells. Without the magnetic field, it has its own a pattern of interaction. But when you have a magnetic field, external magnetic field, what happens? You constrain external magnetic field. So basically, you magnetize the connection, all these interactions. You magnetize them. So now they behave, they said, dimmed. Whenever you have a magnetic field in oscillation, you have lights, right? But you have a strong magnetic field slowing down the vibration. The vibration oscillation create the lights, right? So when you slow them down, so you would see, oh, that's impact. Oh, electricity, why it's dimmed? Because you're changing the electricity's vibration frequency, amplitude. So that's why you would see that's the effect. So fundamentally, it's all about magnetic phenomena and interaction with the magnetic field.
Well, here's another story in livescience.com. Twisted light from the beginning of time could reveal brand new physics. And I brought this to your attention, Dr. Yu, because you're always talking about how we need a brand new physics. And it says
right.
a twist in the universe's first light could hint that scientists need to rethink physics. A pair of Japanese scientists looked at the polarization or orientation of light from the cosmic microwave background radiation, some of the earliest light emitted after the universe's birth. They found the polarization of photons or light particles might be slightly rotated from their original orientation when the light was first produced, and dark energy or dark matter may have been responsible for that rotation. The rotated signature of the photon polarization tells the scientists that something may have interacted with those photons, specifically something that violates a symmetry physicists call parity. This symmetry or parity says that everything looks and behaves the same way, even in a flip system, similar to how things look in the mirror. And if the system was following this parity rule, there wouldn't be this rotation change. So what do you think of this? I know maybe you haven't heard this story before, but any thoughts on this just
right.
from your initial hearing of it from me?
Sure. Yeah. There's one of the fundamental rule called the parity. The symmetry. The parity rule. These are based on the observation, because people have a lack of understanding, because nobody really understands what quantum mechanics. So all these so-called laws pre-existing the quantum mechanics. Okay, so that's why they based on the observation of a majority observation. Oh yeah, most of the things appears symmetry, and with a parity behavior has a mirror image type of behavior. But this kind of observation is only talking about the most likely phenomena. That's not truly all the phenomena. actually there's so many discovery phenomena already proposed by lots of newspaper called not a parity, it's a disparity. So it's a violation of this parity principle. So many observations. It's already say we observed those phenomena. So what this particular things is interesting. So Japanese find out. So the whole purpose we try to explain where comes dark matter and dark energy. So now we try to say look at the first light, the origin of the oldest light, when it's right after Big Bang, and then we started forming, the soup, the hot soup, and then generate light, and try to find the clue from the light, from the oldest light, find the clue if we have some phenomena can explain dark matter and is that in the future and the dark energy too. But I believe this is the wrong way to go. Even though they said, oh yeah, we find the light particle, the polarization of light particles slightly different. Then we observe it now. So somehow suggest maybe new physics, a new explanation of the dark matter, dark energy. But to my audience, I'm just tell you, the so-called dark matter does not need it, does not exist. The so-called dark matter, this interaction does not waste light. So these are actually magnetic way. It is magnetic clouds fill out the universe, and this is the magnetic medium. This is the medium. When you have a light, what is the light? It is vibration of the magnetic medium. When you have an oscillation and create a vibration of the magnetic medium, then you see light. So this is the medium, magnetic medium, fill out throughout the space, and that's the counterpart of the dark matter. But this is not the traditional sense called the dark matter, which is a non-common matter. We are talking about the magnetic medium. It's a common matter because every single matter at the smallest elements are magnetic particles. So they are filled out with the space, and they are interact magnetically, and they propagate lights. And so
what they think as dark matter and dark energy is just the common matter that is already present all around the universe and is what makes us up too, right?
Yes, the current theory says that dark matter is not common matter. So we cannot feel it, and it does not interact with light. So that means we cannot see it. And then they are talking about we cannot see it. And so that's why it's some kind of another species of matter. So that's why we try to find out. So, but based on electromagnetic explanation, the so-called dark matter, the interaction of the dark matter, that's the magnetic medium, that's the medium. Sometimes people call it ether. So I don't call it ether. Ether is a mysterious, non-physical thing. We are talking about just a regular magnetic fluids, or you can say magnetic medium, fill out the space. How do we know that one? Because we can see the light from the beginning of the Earth, supposedly Big Bang, all the way to see now. Why we can see it? Because it has a continuous magnetic medium throughout the space, fill out the space between me and at the beginning of the universe. So it's a continuous, and that continuation creates a ripple. That's a vibration, a ripple propagates. So that's why we can see it. If there's no such continuous medium, we do not see light. So whenever you see light, the space filled with a magnetic medium.
Let's take a quick break. We're listening to Science and You, which is our science segment that we do on A Neighbor's Choice. Here with physicist Dr. Yu, I'm David Gornoski. We'll take a quick break and return in just a moment. Hello, this is David Gornoski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the high quality. Ask for White Oak Pastures beef at your local grocery here in Florida. Or go to wildpastures.com and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Some out-of-the-area law firms advertise that they are the largest. Do you think large firms help your case? Possibly. But your case will receive personal care from local attorneys Catania and Catania. They are family-owned. Tampa Bay attorneys representing clients who have experienced auto and motorcycle accidents. Your case with Catania and Catania will seek to get a settlement in your favor expeditiously. Catania and Catania, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Referrals on request. Get the local law firm that will care for your case from beginning to end. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Catania and Catania, putting families first. Car accident, motorcycle accident, call the local attorneys. Catania and Catania. Offices Tampa. Not attorney spokesperson.
You can't have a fresh outlook on the new year if you're staring through a chipped or cracked windshield. Autoglass America will fix it and give you up to $150 cash back to help pay holiday bills. With qualifying insurance, we'll come to you with mobile service and install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Get a great outlook on the new year with a new windshield and New Year's cash from Autoglass America. 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS.
Science and You is back. I'm David Gornoski, your host, here with Dr. Yu, our physicist friend, looking at science headlines. I want to go to this story here. Scientists may have found the background ripples of the universe. Scientists may have identified the gravitational waves that make up, this is in Yahoo News. I always try to give them credit, people credit for their stories, by John Fingus. Scientists may have identified the gravitational waves that make up some of the universe's background, not just those coming from unusual events like black hole collisions. New Atlas reports that the Nanograv research team has discovered a strong signal that might represent the gravitational wave background, that is, the waves from supermassive black hole mergers across the cosmos. Rather than try to detect the waves directly, Nanograv has been looking for the effects of those waves on pulsars, whose light patterns are mostly consistent over long periods. What do you think of this, Dr. Yu? What's this story mean to you?
Oh, this story tells the research is a continuation of this gravitational wave research. So this has been considered, I believe this gravitational wave first discovered, by LIGO, LIGO experiment in 2014, announced in 2015, and the following year, and it won the Nobel Prize for this project, because this is a gravitational wave being long predicted by Albert Einstein's equation, general relativity. General relativity requires a medium, so that's why the medium is a gravitational wave in order for things to interact. However, the gravitational wave, in my research, and even at that time, Albert Einstein, during Albert's lifetime, he does not even believe a gravitational wave exists, and say, may never been detected, and to the extreme, say it even never exists. So, and I would tell you what they really detect. So originally, we detect some kind of vibration on Earth. That's a mechanical vibration on Earth. Use the LIGO's, the laser, infrared laser detector. When you have a slightly vibrant motion, and then the laser reflects the light, we're changing the angle, so it does not create those kind of interference, and so that's why so you can detect some kind of motion, very minute motion. That's a mechanical motion. That's one. And in this case, they said so in order to detect those kind of motion, it has to be created by black holes, a supermassive black hole collision. Or later on, they're talking about even what is the neutron stars, or something, or pulsars. But it has to be a collision. But in this case, they detect not a collision of black hole. They said we detect the signal from the pulsar. That's the brightest star near the black hole. But pulsar, pulsars magnetic field interact. Basically, pulsars light interact with you have a black hole and find a multiple black hole field were interact, were merged together. During that process, you will see the pulsars light, or you can see magnetic field will have a disturbance. So that's observed indirectly by observe interaction with observe the pulsars light, and see the effect of this called black hole magnetic field merging together. And my understanding, really, black hole, this kind of object, infinite gravity with zero volume, this kind of object does not exist. So what they really detect is a magnetic signal, it's a magnetic interaction. Because the universe, we're just talking about the universe filled with magnetic medium, or you can say magnetic fluid or magnetic medium, permeated entire universe. That's the medium transmitted the light, and that's the medium we observe the light from a pulsar, and that's the medium we observe the disturbance during massive black holes, magnetic field interaction together. So we don't need a black hole. It's all can be explained by electromagnetic phenomena.
I want to go to this other story where we've got just about a minute left, so maybe give us a quick take on this. It's in scientificamerican.com. It says, our improbable existence is no evidence for a multiverse. Experts in probability have spotted a logical flaw in theorists' reasoning. That multiverse is something that some physicists like to tout in pop media. But what's your take on that, Dr. Yu?
Yes, the current theory, put the universe based on the relativity and the quantum mechanics. Use a mathematical expression. Say the universe can only exist if those fundamental constants, say strength, gravity, a mass of electrons, or cosmological constant, has to have the exact same value in order to exist for life. And this story said actually we can observe them without using this this conventional theory, and I agree with them. So we do not need a multi-universe to explain why life can exist in universe, not only on Earth, and could be on all the planets, on other places.
Dr. Yu, thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
And that's Science and You, folks. You can find all of our Science and You segments on aneighborschoice.com. That's aneighborschoice.com. And you'll want to check that out if you want to catch up on episodes that you've missed. Up next, we'll turn to the world of economics and finance, as well as politics, with Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute.
Ronald Reagan would turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040 WHB.
President Biden rolling out a national COVID-19 strategy.
Our plan also protects those most at risk and works for everyone of all races and in urban and rural communities alike.
The president's chief medical advisor was asked at today's White House press briefing if Amazon will help distribute the COVID vaccines.
I don't think I could answer that question. I'd be waving my hands about that. Sorry. Well, you know, one of the new things in this administration is if you don't know the answer, don't guess. Just say you don't know the answer.
And Dr. Anthony Fauci also warned that while the new UK variant of the virus may not be more deadly, it can still cause a serious outbreak. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she could send the Senate an article of impeachment charging President Trump with incitement of insurrection to the Senate as soon as Friday. The Senate voting on a waiver that would allow General Lloyd Austin to serve as defense secretary pending confirmation, even though he retired from the Army less than the mandated 7 years ago. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm your host, David Gornoski. So when I look at this story that Tho Bishop of Mises.org put out, it says Trump's potential legacy, creating 50 million plus enemies of the state. And I heard it was referenced on Rush Limbaugh's broadcast today, reaching pretty large audience there. And it was an interesting thing to hear that. You know, I've never heard Rush Limbaugh reference a Mises.org article before because, you know, that's not usually within his article list that you'll hear if you ever hear a clip from him. And yet that's something that, you know, gives you a kind of snapshot of this growing coalescence between populists and conservatives and libertarians. People like John Brennan are saying that if you're a libertarian, you are someone that needs to be looked at. He said there's a recent clip of him going around where he's saying, if you're an authoritarian, he wants people to investigate you. If you're a libertarian, he wants people to investigate you. Anybody who thinks differently from him, he wants to have investigated. And yet, that is not a reality that most Americans really want to get into, do they? I think they go along with it because they're so paralyzed with obsessive adoration of Donald Trump on the left that they just want to do whatever they can to punish anybody who is associated with him. But it's beyond Donald Trump. There is a deep-seated hatred for people who do not have the same fashionable, politically correct language or the fashionable, trendy dress. And those folks always get kind of deep-seated hatred from those who live in more, rich enclaves in big cities. So joining me now to talk about these issues and more is the president of the Mises Institute, Jeff Deist. How you doing, Jeff?
David, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. So I was just talking before you joined us about how interesting it was to see that Rush Limbaugh was quoting from the Mises Institute today on his broadcast. He was referencing an article by Tho Bishop, who's a frequent guest on our program as well. And it's about Tho's article, Trump's Potential Legacy, 50 million plus enemies of the state. And the gist of the story is that, there wasn't really much of a break from the status quo from Trump's policies, but that his style and his rhetoric and everything may have, and then the left's and the establishment's backlash may have actually created more people who are sick and tired of the state than he could have ever created by actually governing in such a fashion.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Rush Limbaugh still has a big audience. And if you'll recall, it was just, I guess, less than a year ago, he was at the State of the Union speech with Trump and had announced some sort of advanced form stage 4 cancer and looked sickly and was surprised that night with, Presidential Medal of Freedom. And a lot of people thought that his time was short. So I don't know. I'm not really up to date on his current health thing, but it's almost a year later and he's still doing his show, which is remarkable. But I think his point in reading Tho Bishop's column from our site was that, regardless of the new Biden administration, the question remains what happens to all the Trump people. And it's an open question because some of them, I think, will probably fade away, and some of them will go back to the old GOP as it was, and grudgingly maybe, and some of them will say, no way. We're not going to let this enthusiasm die. And what Biden had to do to win the nation was basically to say and do a lot of things which demonized huge swaths of the American population. I mean, but Donald Trump got more than 70 million votes. And to say that all of them voted for someone who's beyond the pale, for someone who's racist or xenophobic, or someone who promoted an insurrection, that these 70-odd million people were either stupid or corrupt or barbaric, it's almost mind-boggling. And if you read the text of Biden's inauguration speech yesterday, he sort of doubles down on some of this rhetoric about nativists and white supremacists and systemic racism, which is really nothing short of slander against the American people, David, who are very, very, very welcoming, very open, very kind. America's not a deeply racist nation. America is not defined by slavery in its history any more than the rest of the world is defined by slavery in its history. We've made great strides since then. So, I'm not sure I share Tho's enthusiasm for all those Trump people are going to go, but it's the biggest question in American politics right now.
Yeah, and we're in a really surreal moment. We have folks that feel like they've got control of almost every aspect of, institution and culture and the government and media and Facebook and everything, the app stores, you can't do anything. They've got everything under a monoculture control. And yet they're not happy, are they, Jeff? We heard Katie Couric saying that we've got to deprogram people who are listening to these echo chambers, these lies, we got to deprogram them, as if her program is not programming, as if what she does on CBS when she's lying for wars and lying for banker bailouts and lying for theft of people's labor through the state and its regulatory capture by special interests. She spends her whole life just programming people into accepting political violence as passé. And here she wants to deprogram people. They're never happy, are they, with the power they get? They always want more.
No, and it's interesting to hear a figure like her, sort of a lightweight, non-intellectual, happy, clappy TV hostess, just speak so glibly about something which is really, really nasty, deprogramming people. I mean, that's an authoritarian Orwellian phrase. And so that strikes me as something that she has no business saying so breezily. But for all their talk of diversity, what they really want is a dumbed down monoculture, the kind of culture which the Katie Couric TV shows in the morning promote, which is not very thoughtful, not very intellectual, and just sort of one kind of politics fits all, and that's it. And they want this for 330 million people. So, there's going to be resistance. We're not yet at a point in this country's history where the states are just going to accept being glorified federal counties. That's certainly what the left wants. As a matter of fact, individual states are almost an impediment or an embarrassment to the left. But nonetheless, they're still there, and we've got some real divides between all the red and blue state houses, all the red and blue cities, all the red and blue voters, and obviously urban-rural lines are a big part of that. And it's a problem for America. It's a big problem for America to have the country this divided, but not along neat geographic lines, but along various lines within each state. And so when Katie Couric says, "Well, these people are going to have to be deprogrammed," I mean, she's really saying something absurd, because people don't just go away when they lose an election, and you really get the sense that that's what she hopes for, that they'll just go away.
And she also used in that clip on Bill Maher's show that they believe in the big lie. They use these little bumpers, these little slogans, and the big lie is about what Trump and his supporters disputed about the integrity of the election. And they all use that sentence. And every news outlet that you go to that's on that same wavelength, they all say the big lie. They won't talk about it. They'll just say the big lie, like it's a creepy, scary thing. Of course, Al Gore and Showtime can make documentaries about how he was stolen. His 2000 election was stolen. That's not a big lie. That's just perfectly just and righteous to say those things. And of course, several Democrats objected to the Electoral College certification of Trump in 2016. And of course, that's never been called a big lie or anything, or inciting violence like they're trying to pin on Ted Cruz and others for doing the same in 2020. So they have no whatsoever pretense to consistency or moral decency in the things that they say. But where do you think, Jeff, they get all these same slogans? They Canadian Prime Minister, all the Prime Ministers say, we're going to build back better. And then they all say, the Davos crowd, we're going to have a great reset. And then they all say independently, we're going to have this repudiation of this big lie. Where do they get? Are these coming from a talking point list, or are they just that mindlessly mimetic, Jeff? Do they just mimetically absorb like a herd, just like cow, whatever they say, or sheep, just blah, just doing the same mimic that the others are doing?
Well, there's certainly a huge similarity among Western elites, regardless of country. In other words, they have far more in common with each other than they do with non-elites in their own country. So that's a big part of it. We can refer euphemistically to the Davos crowd, which means people who go to Davos, Switzerland every year and meet with sort of globalist international figures. I mean, that's a little trite, but nonetheless, there is an elite class in just about every Western country, most of whom went to the most elite schools, places like Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard and Yale and Wharton. And they tend to all think alike. They tend to have the same interests. And so they tend to sound awfully similar. And they all, in effect, are enormously anti-democratic in outlook. For all of their talk about democracy, they don't want things localized. They don't really believe in national sovereignty. They'd much prefer that there was sort of a one-size-fits-all kind of social democracy across the West. And yes, there might still be nations as sort of conceptual entities, but for the most part, the big decisions would be made by people like them. And so I think that's why a Trudeau and a Pete Buttigieg have really plenty in common.
But Jeff, I gotta push a little more on that, because you and I, we share a lot of the same ideas. We think about how it's great to have anti-war type situation. We believe in private property. We believe in free speech and diversity of thought. we share some of the same thoughts on the Federal Reserve, but yet we're not using slogans. I mean, I call the left the McWoke crowd. And I don't see you and Tom Woods and everybody else saying McWoke. That's just the word. It's like these guys get their little coordinated slogans, though. Big lie, big lie. They don't, it's like we're just all over the place. These people are very coordinated the way they say things. It's Great Reset, Build Back Better. We are going to build back. They use these little weird terms on every single news outlet. Are they getting this from a talking point that, you know, I don't get it. Maybe it's the DNC, just, you know, because we do have those emails from WikiLeaks where, you know, the Hillary Clinton campaign was talking about like Maggie Haberman. She's always reliable. She always gets the stories out we want. And they had many, many journalists. So I'm just assuming that they're still having that kind of relationship with the press. And they're saying, okay, I want us all to emphasize that it's a big lie. Use the word big lie. I think they're doing that, Jeff, because you and I sound the same on views, but we never use those little terms that way, you know?
Well, certainly the left is more disciplined in its messaging. Certainly the left is better at politics because they're willing to put aside differences between themselves in order to win the battle that's in front of them, which is to make the right a permanent minority in their various countries. So I do agree with you that messaging, it sounds like it all comes from one place, but I don't think there's any big nefarious conspiracy. I think these people just tend to, again, live in a bubble and read and talk to only other people in that bubble. And so that's why you see this kind of messaging. And, you know, when they call people things like COVID deniers, or they talk about, you know, questions about the election, which were totally valid, by the way. It's completely valid to look at the Trump presidential election and say, you know, some of these things were a little strange. That doesn't mean Trump won or Biden won, whatever. But there certainly were some irregularities. So to say, well, that's the big lie. I mean, all this is designed to pull up really unpleasant Nazi imagery. Mm-hmm. When you say the big lie, you call someone a denier. And so it's really I would go so far as to say a disgusting use of language. But look, I mean, once you believe in an oppression narrative, once you believe that America is a bad place fundamentally, that its people are bad fundamentally, that its history is bad fundamentally, you know, there's no more reason to view politics as anything other than war. To say, look, we might pretend to go along and have these two parties. We might pretend to say, well, we need a Senate. But at the end of the day, you're just triangulating to win the war, to defeat the oppressor by any means necessary. There's nothing wrong with lying if someone is oppressing you, for example. It's part of a broader war. So, you know, I think you have to understand the left in that sense. They view this as a moral act. They view this as one big morality play, and they're on the side of the angels. And if you once you understand that, it explains why they don't have any issue with gross hypocrisy. They don't have any issue with saying something radically different than what they said 12 months ago. They don't have any issue with radically different standards for the left and right. They don't have any issue with a media class and a academic institutions which are overwhelmingly one-sided. I mean, it makes sense in that context, which is this is a war, and in war there's no such thing as lying. There's no such thing as unfair. It's just, you know, you just use the tools at your disposal, including disinformation, to defeat the other side.
We're speaking with Jeff Deist of Mises.org. You can follow him at Jeff Deist on Twitter. Back in just a moment with more thoughts from Jeff Deist. Hello, this is David Gornoski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Hi, this is Gary from Good Faith Home Buyers, and I buy houses cash. If you own your house and want to sell it fast, call me at 727-330-6224. That's 727-330-6224. I can pay cash and close fast. I buy houses in any condition any price range, and any location. I'm not a realtor or associated with any realty company. I'm a private real estate investor who buys several houses a month and wants to buy more. I'll buy inherited houses, divorce houses, behind in payment houses. I'll even buy my tenant won't pay me the rent houses. Do you own a house that is trashed and needs thousands of dollars in repairs? Great, because I love buying junky houses. I buy vacant houses, abandoned houses, condemned houses, and foreclosure houses. If you own a house and want to sell it fast, call me at 727-330-6224. That's 727-330-6224.
Do you despise lawyers? That may be the case until you need one. If you've been in an auto accident and need legal advice, go to the local attorneys that have served Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Catania and Catania. They are family owned. They understand your legal situation. When you need legal representation, Catania and Catania will care for your case from the beginning to the end of representation. You won't need to worry. Catania and Catania will represent you through the entire process. Auto or motorcycle accidents are too frequent in Florida. Catania and Catania. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Referrals on request. Contact Catania and Catania. Putting families first. Offices, Tampa. An attorney spokesperson.
A Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm your host, David Gornoski, here with Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute, their website, Mises.org. That's Mises.org. And you can follow Jeff and his commentary at Jeff Deist on Twitter. And Jeff, you were mentioning that the left doesn't care about consistency. They don't care about what it takes to get power. They just want that power because they're in a religious war. And that's very true. And there is a lot of anthropological background for that we won't get into right now. But it is ultimately sacrificial in the sense that Obama literally killed more innocent human lives than Donald Trump. But you would never know that if your cocoon was the corporate press, the newspapers, the television shows. Even the ones that are supportive of Trump wouldn't make that point, right? Because the right-wing conservative Inc. doesn't even think in those terms. But for people who are not who are normal people, people who know what's right and wrong, thou shalt not kill, kind of a big deal. On that standard, it's clear that Barack Obama's foreign policy killed more innocent human lives than Donald Trump did. And yet one is lauded as a monster beyond all comprehension, and the other one is one of the most heroic saints to ever grace the White House. What do you make of that, Jeff? We're talking about moral crusades, and yet sacrifice is okay for these guys.
Well, politics is about perception. It's not about facts. It's never been easier actually to ascertain what Obama did, let's say, with respect to drone strikes as opposed to what Trump did. So in a sense, despite having all the information at our fingertips that our grandparents didn't have, they had to read and rely on, let's say, one newspaper in the 7 o'clock news. We're actually pretty dug in terms of our perceptions. And so there's a perception that Barack Obama was a very moral person, the first black president, and people just go with that perception, and that Trump is was a demagogue, and who destroyed the sanctity of the office. And when you've got all the media basically promoting one narrative, or most of the media, I guess I should say, it's awfully hard to overcome because most people are not intensely political, thank goodness. Most people don't want to wake up and just spend all day thinking about and reading about and researching the latest ins and outs of political intrigue. Most people want to form their thoughts and opinions pretty superficially and get about the business of living their lives. And that would be great if we had a little bit less political society. If government didn't matter so much, we could all just view it as like reading the football scores or something very briefly a couple times a week. But unfortunately, government is the major player in our society. It now, I think, eclipses just about any other agent in society. And so, people's perceptions are very powerful, and they're generally developed early, and once developed are hard to shake. And what I mean is that people rarely change their worldview in midlife or beyond. So that's what we're up against, and the media uses this fact very skillfully because it knows it's in a perception battle, not a facts and reporting battle.
Yeah. And yet, a lot of us grew up, much of America grew up, at least somewhat related to Sunday school culture, where we learned things like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, right? We learned that early on as kids. But wouldn't that be great if we could have one news outlet, just one, that actually operated based on those principles? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. So we're going to condemn killing and stealing wherever it happens. But you can't even get that in this media environment, can you, Jeff?
Well, it's a simple philosophy, peace and voluntarism and markets and trade and non-aggression. This is all very simple. I mean, it's certainly readily available to people who want to read about it. It's very difficult to implement or maintain simply because power tends to fill vacuums. And there's always people in society who want power and seek power. As a matter of fact, that's one of the big conceptual criticisms of a libertarian worldview per se, which is that, well, it's unrealistic because humans are fallen, and so amongst other forms of criminality, they like to criminalize government and use it for their own purposes and corrupt it and benefit from it and derive power from it and enrich themselves rather than having government simply be a safeguard of life, liberty, and property. So I certainly understand what we're up against, but that doesn't change the fact that we all have an obligation to be peaceable in our personal lives, and I think that flows to our view of government as well. So the fact that it's perhaps not always easy or popular doesn't get us off the hook, David.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show, I saw your article on Mises.org. It says, what Biden and Harris will do. And you said the left, at the end of the article, you said the left is in no mood for reconciliation with Trump supporters, but punishment is not a policy. It is the act of tyrants. And, the left talks about empathy, but if they could just have empathy for one moment together as a little collective and say, wait a second, you just can't keep beating on people with Hollywood and music and everything just raining down shame and hate on somebody and not have a cycle of reciprocal aggression. And I just wish that people could come together, especially the ones that pretend to be the moral arbiters, and really practice what they preach for once,
Well, the way to tone it down is to have politics matter less.
Right.
To not have federal government as the central chief organizing principle in society. And that's awfully tough because so many people have accepted that. In fact, the 20th century is basically, in the United States, a history of usurpation, of executive power away from Congress and federal power away from the states. So now we're in a position where the federal government controls an awful lot of what happens in our lives.
Yeah, that's very true. So it always goes back to that principle that you keep talking about of subsidiarity and allowing people to disagree and get on with local affairs and let that kind of decentralized republic that the founders intended to be something we try again. Let's hope that we can come to that. But it's going to take a cultural transformation of people losing their appetite for coercion. So I appreciate what you do at Mises Institute, Jeff, to further and incentivize and encourage people to have an appetite for peace and freedom, because that's the only thing we can do to remain a civilized and prosperous society. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And folks, that's it for A Neighbor's Choice today. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. That's hello at aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.